think of prompting, I do think of it as a communication, a form of communication. And in this context of using AI, and I've really focused mostly on ChatGPT, is a way to prompt this language model and communicate it in a way to ask it to do something for you, and or tell it to do something for you. And what you get out of it is just like in life, is what you put into it. What did you prompt it? What did you ask it or tell it to do for you? And did you give it enough information? And if you didn't, then I would take a look at what is in your prompts. What is in that communication that you've given it?
The tools are a little bit different in how you prompt them. And they are constantly changing. So I've been doing prompt engineering since GPT-2, if you can believe it. And the styles of prompts that you use have evolved considerably between all of the sort of newer models, and they're continuing to evolve. So there are a lot of researchers and practitioners like myself that are working on trying to figure out better and better techniques to solve some of the challenges that these large language models have in executing the prompt the way that you want to.
One of the great things is, just like you can learn communication skills, you can learn soft skills, you can learn to be what's called a prompt engineer. And a lot of that is around understanding what structure is best to use. So just before, I mentioned giving the AI an example of what you want output. Now, lots of people, when they first kind of log into something like ChatGPT or any AI system, especially the image generation systems, might just give a very basic instruction. So, write me a blog post on marketing. If you're not giving really detailed information, like this is what I want my H1, H2 headers to be, I would like you to output this using HTML code in the code window so I can copy it. Here's an example of a blog post or a blog format. That second option is going to give you a much better result, much more focused result that you can then work with, rather than, expecting something of the AI and then getting frustrated when it doesn't produce exactly what you want.
Nobody in their right mind would calculate a square root if they didn't have to. And maybe 20 years from now, people are going to say, well, why start with a blank sheet of paper? Why not start with some prompts or some ideas, some brainstorming from the computer? That's a great way to kind of turbocharge your writing. ChatGPT is not self-reflective very well. It can't really do that very easily. Or professors will actually say, well, based on what we covered in class last week, what do you think of X? And so the student would have to regurgitate essentially what they did learn into a prompt, and that's not necessarily the easy thing to do.
All of that kind of can come together at this point in what I call a super prompt, which is just this mega prompt with like information about your characters, information about your setting, information about what happens in the actual scene, and then instructions on how to write the prose and all of that. And you can do that yourself, like compiling all of that information, or there are tools out there that sort of facilitate that for you, and then give it to the generative AI model, and then out spits that next section of the scene. And so I think the way I view prompting is making sure it has all of the information that it needs, and making sure that your instructions are clear, so it's not being asked to do something that is not what you intended.
One of my insights is that when you interact with the generative AI, how you hold it in your mind, how you represent it, and then how you communicate with it, that this is really the foundation of it.
So I hear a lot about, AI will never replace creativity. I say, there's where you have it wrong. It will replace creativity, not in 100%, but it will help creativity, because it will connect dots where human beings are not making direct that connection. So it will help. So I'll also see the world of AI will be a world of AI assistance for everyone. If you're doing B2C or B2B or whatever, in which area you are, it will be AI assistance. So it will help people do their job in a better way, because they're helped with a machine. So that's being a techno-positivist. So making a better world with the help of machines. So that is what is going to happen in the future. I'm like completely convinced about that.
You have to know, you, the human, have to know what's a good title to be able to pick one of the good titles that was offered. But then also knowing how to frame prompts relative to particular generative tools. And there's some crossover, obviously, but I think about additive prompting in Midjourney versus the kind of like, what are they called? Mega prompts in Claude or in ChatGPT. Like those are completely different forms ultimately, even though they both are sort of housed under the name prompt. So I think there's a lot of space for us to really be pushing deeper into prompting as craft.
And I'm not sure if it's just what I've learned or over the last 8 to 12 months, what I've seen working better in prompting is, and again, maybe the tools, maybe the AI is just trending this way, is more natural language prompting. Natural language prompting mixed with specific keywords, I think is starting to work better and better. So you saw examples of me saying, I want a banking app. I want it to be fun. I want it to be, those things are starting to work really, really well. And the reason I suggest them is maybe not because they're most effective, but because people who are new to prompting and new to AI feel less intimidated, right? Otherwise, they feel like they need to know certain keywords. I got to do comma separated, like all these things. It's like start out with natural language. And I like what you said earlier, generate something and then continue to chip away at it, continue to evolve your prompting, add to it, take away from it. But I always recommend that people start with natural language and start to append on any tool they're using, maybe small kind of like deviations or things that would kind of like change direction. So if you're just not finding things are working, go back and change your initial kind of natural language prompt and then start just adding or targeting using specific tagged words.
I actually think that good prompting is good communication. And humorously, I look around and I see prompts everywhere now, right? A billboard trying to sell you, insurance, that's a prompt. Naming a persona is probably one of the most powerful tokens or most powerful things you can put into a prompt. So if you say act as a senior engineer, act as a senior coach, act as a expert level organizational psychologist, right? Like all these different roles that you can get the models to in a way kind of inhabit, that's super powerful. Stating your why, incredibly important, right? Like I'll tell people what I want you to do with the model initially out the gate is just narrate the terrain. What's all the tacit knowledge that's in your head that this thing needs to know about what you want it to do? Give it a roll, tell it the context, tell it the terrain around you, unpack from your head, get all of that out. And then once you've done that, tell it, hey, now that you know all of this, I've described the problem we want to solve, what's in front of us. Come back, and what I want you to do, Claude, for example, I want you to restate back to me what my goals are that were either stated or that you inferred. That's incredibly powerful. And then the second thing you do to get a really good prompt is you tell it, and this is really important, what are the assumptions you're making right now, and what questions do you have for me? Because one of the critical things that people do in the first early prompts whenever they're interacting with AIs is they underspecify. And if you have a very underspecified prompt up front, the academic studies on this really say that if you lose the thread initially and you have to keep doing a lot of corrections, if you're like in correction 3 or 4, basically you're just going to have a bad time. You might as well just restart the whole thing.
My favorite current prompts or to include in prompts are be concise and no affirmations. Because it was great when it first started saying, this is a breakthrough. This is a paradigm shift that you're talking about here and so forth. And I was like, wow, okay, wow, this is amazing. And then I kind of realized, oh, it's saying that to everybody right now. It's kind of like in that movie Her, where he says, how many
what a
people
great film. What a great film.
Yeah,
it's such a great movie. Yeah.
How many people are you talking to? And she's talking to like thousands of people, simultaneously. And so okay, so to me, the name of the game with the generative AI is to understand. So we have, right, Carl Jung has this idea of the collective unconscious, so we all kind of are, I don't know, we all get the heritage of this collective unconscious. I call generative AI the collective conscious mind. Yeah. Right. So we took everything that humans have created when we were conscious, and then we trained this, we don't know what it is, but this neural net on this. And then it gives anyone access to all of that real time at whatever, 100 or 1,000x the speed of a normal, human mind. I've heard it described as it's like having 100 PhD level researchers, writers, designers in a building that just work for you 24/7, And so that's, it's easy to get lost in there. And in particular, I think it's easy to, let's say, outsource or delegate cognitive work, which is the laying on the couch and eating Cheetos version, I think, of using it. And for me, the way I like to use it is I like to ask, okay, how far can I take whatever I'm doing in my mind, right? How can I do the hardest that I can do? And then I go and kind of use it as a collaboration partner to have any breakthroughs or develop thinking or kind of work out different perspectives and things. And then once I've kind of gotten that next step that I needed, I try to go back to work in my own mind, because to me, the name of the game is to build my own capacity and build my own, kind of make myself stronger, not to just, push the button and get all the golden eggs kind of thing.
I was playing around with doing kind of a punk rock song, and then I was going to make an anime-ish video out of it. So you can see some of the generations that I did here. And it's like, and these are kind of the prompts here are like anime, cyberpunk, punk rock, nightclub, mohawks. Is that leather jackets? Sure, leather jackets. Now, just to note, like, all of these video generators do cool but often weird things. So for what essentially would probably come down to a 45-second video, thus far I've generated like just a ton of videos for this, because not everything's going to work. Like in this case, I think this guy's just kind of standing there. That's sort of boring. So, there's a really good example here where it does, these all freak out on you quite a bit. You can see sort of how she sort of teleports in. So it just requires a massive amount of reprompting, retrying things until you get something. Oh, this is infamous as well, walking backwards. That happens. I don't know if you can see, there we go. This happens all the time for some reason. So it is really just a matter of like, it's sometimes it's a bit of a dice roll, but at that point, the way that I look at it is that I am just generating lots and lots of material. And then from an editing standpoint, I then take all of that raw material that I've harnessed, and it's my job then to make it all work, to sculpt it into something. Like if I were to use any one of the LLMs and say for the YouTube channel and just say like, give me, 10 video titles that will immediately go viral. And it gives me, and if it actually legitimately gave those to me, I don't know, like that would, I don't know if I would love that. What I really like is it comes back with 10 kind of half-baked ideas, but there's little nuggets in there that, get me thinking. And I'm like, oh, word here, a word here, a word here. And then suddenly you kind of, not that I would ever text prompt for like, give me 10 viral video ideas, but or titles, but it's a really great springboard to help you with your own creativity. Again, particularly since I work in a studio by myself, it's usually just me muttering to myself and the dog looking at me like, what's going on? So, having an LLM around, just using the ChatGPT voice feature, it's a good way of just, of having an extra voice and kind of thinking out loud with an LLM, I guess. You could go through with something like DALL-E, generate up some logos for it. Midjourney, interestingly enough, has one thing that I really like doing with them is you could just sort of put in keywords and then prompt keywords for whatever your business may be, and then prompt color palette in, and it'll just give you like literally just color palettes that are sort of loosely associated with the words that you fed it.
I use ChatGPT with hugely blocked prompts, like syntax and grammar prompts, sentence variability prompts.
What does hugely blocked mean?
It means like what I mean is like that's not a technical term of any kind. It's just
Okay.
like very specific on the syntax and grammar structures that you're
Okay.
asking for. I mean, as
Uh-huh.
you know from your own work with prompts, like the more specific you are, the better,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
like the more you like coherently prompt it in a series of ways, the better a response you're going to get. Then I would take that, I put it into pseudo write, which is a stochastic writing instrument that allows you to basically take a block of text and the machine will shorten it or lengthen it, or you can put it in the style of, it has a customized button, so it's like put in the style of Ernest Hemingway or what or whoever, and it will do that. And then I also use Cohere for individual lines, so that they allowed me not just to prompt engineer but to train the prompts. So I would create the prompts and then I would train it on a series of examples. So and I think when you get into the space where you're not just prompt engineering, you're building the archives that the prompt reflects on. That's another layer of creativity that gives you a lot more control and gives you a lot more. You're building something much more specific when you build it that way.
What is very interesting is, I would say, if you learn what are the principles of how computers understand human language, that one is very common in all different technologies, which is, I think, like in year 2024, anyone doesn't know how to prompt, they're already behind. It doesn't matter what is their job and what's the relationship with AI or computer science. That's a skill set you have to learn. So the way I use it is something called attention mechanism. So basically, when you have a communication with someone, your brain is pay attention to certain words. That those certain words, it would help to create to understand the meaning of that sentence. So if you learn how to detect those attention mechanism words, that's all you need to use on your prompt.
Interesting.
So instead of like, if you want to, let's say like you want to give me a prompt, I would tell you what is the attention mechanism words that would pick up those words from your sentence to help computer to understand the meaning of that sentence. If you give me a sentence, I will tell you later, most likely what would be. Yeah. If someone wants to master prompting, I think it's very easy, like probably like in 1 or 2 hours research. If you learn NLU, natural language understanding, so and learn the basics, like how machines understand human language. So that would help a lot with prompting.
That whole idea of prompt engineering, because the sophistication of the prompt yields the outcome.
Yes.
And so we're going to be we have to be very present as to what questions we're asking, and then you can get incredible outcomes out the back end.
Yeah, but there's so much, let's say, like opportunity / uncertainty that it brings. Like last week, I was listening to a philosophy lecture, and it was excellent. It's on Jordan Peterson's Peterson Academy, and I was listening to some modern philosophy stuff, and I heard one kind of presentation. I was like, this is beautiful. Like, this is just so well presented, but it was about one philosopher. And I was thinking, yeah, it would be nice if I could have this on any, philosopher. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I have generative AI. And so I took the transcript, I went over to Claude. I said, here's a philosophy talk that here's a transcript of a presentation, and it was on Descartes. And I was like, can you write me a prompt so that I could have a presentation like this on any. So it wrote me a prompt, and it was long. I mean, it was like 5 pages with like all this detailed shit that I would have never thought of. And then I took the prompt and I tweaked it up a little bit. And then I went over to ChatGPT and I dropped it in, and then it, pulled up one. And then I went on my phone and I said, read aloud to me. And, 10 minutes later, it wasn't, I've had to tweak it a few times, but like to be able to do that. And then now I'm, You know what I'm saying? It's just such a paradigm shift.
It is a massive paradigm shift, and just, there's a few areas where, as we kind of let this loose, it's going to completely change the game. Software development is one of those areas, right? Where it'll just write the software for you. We spend a lot of time, if you're building a software system today, we're wondering and being careful about how you maintain that software system. And now we can just ignore that entire maintenance side and say the AI will handle that side totally. And so there's unbelievable potential and opportunity coming. I think this is such a huge uplifter for humanity overall. I love it.
As you well know, working with a large language model is not one prompt and then it's over. Right. It's actually a conversation. It's a dialogue, and it's an ongoing, you're working with a collaboration brainstorming partner. Like you and I are talking right now. It's very similar to that. And you actually need to use your intuition to use it the right way and effectively and leverage it. And so instead of having my students submit a prompt or even a series of prompts, I had them submit the entire transcript. And yeah. And so what I told them,
that's good.
Yeah. And I actually I graded the transcript as the main part of the assessment. So, if it was a 100-point assessment with 3 things you got to turn in, I'll make up the numbers. I can't quite remember, but the transcript might have been 60 points. The essay itself might have only been 20. And then, I can't remember what the last part would be, but the point is the transcript became the most important part of the assessment. And some people go, well, what do you're just grading how they use this technology. But what I found was that in the transcript itself, there is a lot going on. If you teach the kids a couple of strategies, and if you teach them, quote unquote, the right way, you're going to get a window into the process of thinking, process of learning or writing, their ability to understand the content, their ability to understand the task and objective. All of that exists in the way that they speak to the large language model, or it doesn't. And then if it doesn't, then you've got feedback to give them, right? And you give them a B- or something, and you go, hey, here, you don't want to be doing this. This is not the right way to use this particular technology. And so it's developing AI literacy while also continuing to evaluate all the things that we want to evaluate.
Or even ask it like, what kinds of questions should I have about this thing? Some of the material I read is so dense, I'm like, I don't even know where to start here. Like, give me a couple of questions to kind of prompt my thinking here, and then I can kind of dive in and get a little bit more nuanced with the way that I'm kind of organizing my thoughts and coming up with ideas. So yeah, it's really, really helpful for navigating that. And yeah, I always laugh thinking back to like when my parents were helping me with school and they're like, well, we had to go to a library. And I'm like, now I'm sounding old. Like, well, I had to Google it. And now it's like, these kids are, have tons of access. So I think if it's used right and it's helping you reinforce the way that you learn, I think education is becoming more accessible as long as it's not hallucinating on bad data. So, that's a problem for another conversation, I'm sure.
I think you can be creative in the way you ask a question, and that's creativity too. Producing.
Yes.
I feel like you're describing producing, you're conflating creativity and production. And I think thinking, creativity, and production are all 3 different, very separate processes that are actually happening between our brain and our fingers. Depending on what you're doing in the context, the emphasis on one or the other, or choosing not to use AI in one or the other, I think we're going to get a lot more sophisticated.
The term prompt engineering, it's exactly what an engineer would call critical thinking in the liberal arts. Right? Like an engineer, when faced with like, how does one string together nouns and verbs in a way that coaxes interestingness from the algo? It's like, dude, you don't engineer it. You read Plato. You attend a play. you cross-pollinate concepts. And so that's when the light went off, Evan, that what if breadth is going to reemerge as the new depth? What if, and this is a little bit contrarian, but I've lived this, what if our 25-year national nightmare of STEM overspecialization starts to give way to room for poets and painters and philosophers and psychologists again? My constructive prompt tip right now is I love having conversations wherein I ask for the AI's help in making the prompt for the master project. And so I'll give you an example. My weekly newsletter is, there's an artisanal, bespoke way that I might do that, which is to read 50,000 articles, find 7 I find compelling, and then do a handwritten treatise on each, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's what do I really do? Like, hey, robot, trawl the interwebs for what's compelling according to these dimensions that I continue to believe mark compellingness. And that would be the closest thing I have to weights, right? Like here's what Bechtel thinks matters, right? Come back to me, etc. And what I found was that run to run, the model would drift and be a little wild. And then one day I had the low-key eureka moment. I said, hey, what might I do in this request to help you help yourself better standardize and demarcate good from bad and all the rest? It says, well, if you reframe the prompt, and so prompts about better prompting in window B, and this is important, Evan, fed to window A without any knowledge of that background conversation,
Mm-hmm.
that's really enriched my productivity. Because what I find is if I have the whole conversation in one context window, then it's just trying to build the universal truth according to everything it knows. I think intentionally blinding these tools to say, no, system B is my editor, system A is my author, and never the twain shall meet. That's really helped me out.